to the Rocking October session. A very big thank you to Hein from STBB Attorneys, who is going to impart some more excellent knowledge to all of us. So look forward to your session, Hein. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. No pressure. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. What we're going to have a look at today are some of the hidden costs that creep in the transfer process that the seller and the purchaser don't necessarily know about. And it's good to know about those costs and fees so that you are better equipped to advise your buyers and sellers should these questions come up or should they arise out there in the marketplace. So as an introduction, it's important to give a full disclosure of all fees and costs which the seller and the purchaser must pay. And it's important to understand who pays for those specific costs in the conveyancing process. Not all the fees and the costs are quantified or can be given right at the outset. And we'll have a look at those costs and figures so that you can better understand it. But you as the agents, you are normally the first point of call. You're the first person that deal with the buyers and the sellers when they sell or purchase a property. So it's good for you guys to know about these potential hidden little costs. And it's great so that you can advise your clients, but you must just remember of X, Y, and Z, which makes you look far more informed and professional, which is fantastic. So we're going to have a look at those hidden costs and hidden fees that we don't always know about or think about in the conveyancing process, and which the purchasers and sellers don't necessarily know about either. So when we have a look, firstly, we're going to have a look at the hidden costs for the seller, and then we'll get to the purchaser. But just as a point reference, and we're going to get obviously more into detail with regards to each and every single point. But the hidden costs for the seller, we're going to have a look at the Regulation 68(1) applications. That is when the seller lost his or her title deed. And then there's obviously a cost involved with getting a new title deed from the deeds office. We're going to have a look at the bond cancellation fees or bond cancellation costs. Very often sellers forget that there's a fee involved with the cancellation of their bond. Also, penalty interest or a penalty charge by the bank when they cancel their mortgage bond with the banks. We're going to get into detail with that. Sometimes there's a consultant's fee for obtaining rate clearance figures or rate clearance certificates from the municipality. Sometimes the attorneys attending to the seller's transfer must issue guarantees where that seller is purchasing again. Rates and levy clearance figures, bridging finance, and the cost of compliance certificates. So if we have a look, firstly at obviously when the seller lost his title deed, he cancelled his bond, he paid his bond off in full. He decided to cancel his bond because he wants his original title deed with him. That's fine. The bond would be cancelled. He would then get his title deed from the bank and he will keep that in his possession. Very often, the sellers lose those title deeds. I'm busy with two matters right now where the sellers have lost their title deeds. And then there's a cost involved with getting a new title deed. And this is what I then explained to them, because there's obviously a conveyancing fee. We've got to draft an application in terms of Section 68(1), or rather Regulation 68(1), that the client must sign, which he or she confirms, I've lost my title deed number T6629 of 2018. Despite a diligent search, I cannot find the title deed. I request the Registrar of Deeds, Cape Town, to issue me with a new title deed. Once that application has been signed, we send it to the deeds office. The deeds office charges a levy in order to issue us with a copy of that title deed. As soon as we've got a copy of that title deed, we then place an advert in the newspaper advertising that Hein Daisel has lost his title deed number T6629 of 2018 in respect of this property of 2659 Parow. He's going to apply for a new copy of the title deed. If there's anybody out there that objects to him getting a new title deed, they can come to the deeds office and advise the deeds office accordingly. So once we've placed the ad, we then lodge that, not lodge, but we place that advert, and we place a copy of that title deed with the Registrar of Deeds Cape Town. It gets done on the 12th floor. It lies there for inspection. So anybody that has got an objection to Hein getting a new title deed must then come forward. So if any creditor that, for example, kept Hein's title deed as security can see, oh, wait a minute, Hein wants to sell his property. He gave me his title deed because I lent him 100,000 Rand. He borrowed money from me. Then I can go and object to Hein getting a new title deed. So that process is costly because the advert at the newspaper is about 2,000 Rand. There are deeds office levies involved. There's conveyances fee involved. So it costs between 4,000 and 5,000 Rand for that seller, if he lost his title deed, to get a new title deed from the deeds office. And obviously a lot of time in the past, it wasn't like that. You didn't have to place an advert or anything like that. So it wasn't that costly. But these days, as from the 1st of January 2020, it is costly because adverts need to be placed in a newspaper in the area where the property is situated. The same steps will apply if a mortgage bond was lost, but luckily, if there's a mortgage bond, if FNB or Absa Bank or Nedbank or Standard Bank lost the mortgage bond or they lost the title deed, then there's no cost for the seller because the bank will pay that cost because the title deed was in their possession. So in that scenario, luckily, the seller will not have to pay for the cost of the new title deed. The bank that lost the title deed will have to pay for it. It's only if your seller had his original title deed in his possession and he lost it, then he has to pay for a new title deed. So it's just important to advise clients if they tell you, oh, I lost my title deed, how much is it going to cost? Between 4,000 and 5,000 Rand to get a new title deed from the deeds office because of advertising, etc. Then your seller will also have to pay bond cancellation fee. So if your seller has got a mortgage bond on his property and the bond must be cancelled because he is now selling his property, he will have to pay a fee for that bond cancellation. Very often, sellers come to me and say, okay, but you know what, I've paid off my bond in full 10 years ago. I don't owe the bank a cent in respect of that mortgage bond. That's perfect, but that mortgage bond must still be cancelled. So if your bond was with FNB and FNB is advised that we need the title deed because the property was sold and cancellation figures, the bank will then say, okay, no, there's nothing owing to us as the bank. The client has already paid off his bond many years ago, so there's zero outstanding. However, FNB will send that bond document and the title deed to their panel attorney in order to cancel that bond. So as you know, in a transfer process, there's a transferring attorney. If the seller had a bond, in this scenario with the bank, there's a bond cancellation attorney, and then there's a bond registration attorney for the purchaser as well. But the point is, there'll be a bond cancellation attorney. The bank will appoint one of their panel attorneys to attend to the cancellation of that mortgage bond. And there's a fee involved, despite the fact that the client doesn't owe a single cent to the bank. There's still an attorney that must do the admin in getting that bond cancelled at the deeds office. And normally the fee for that is about 4,200 Rand. that those attorneys will charge in order to cancel that mortgage bond at the deeds office. Because again, there's a lot of admin involved. They will collect the title deed and the mortgage bond. They will write to the transferring attorneys to confirm that they've got the title deed. They will write to the transferring attorneys to confirm X amount of money is outstanding on the bond account. That amount of money must be issued a guarantee that be paid. We issue them the guarantee, and then the bond cancellation attorneys will sign the necessary consent to cancel that bond, and they will then lodge that bond document and the title deed and the consent from the bank at the deeds office to cancel that bond. And again, there's also a deeds office levy involved with that. So there are costs involved with just cancelling a mortgage bond. It doesn't happen free. As I say, it's about 4,200 Rand to cancel a bond. And if the seller had more bonds than just one bond, so he took out his first bond, a couple of years later he took out a second bond to do renovations at the property, a couple of years later he took out a third mortgage bond to pay for varsity fees for the kids or whatever, all those bonds will have to be cancelled. So for bond number one, it's about 4,200 Rand. If there's a second bond that must be cancelled, that's another 1,000 Rand and another 1,000 Rand, etc. So if he had three bonds on his property, the first one is 4,200 Rand, and then 1,000 Rand for the next two bonds. So it's 6,200 Rand to cancel the three bonds, for example. And sellers don't know that there's actually a fee involved with cancelling of a mortgage bond or mortgage bonds, despite the fact that...
Just a question. Moritz said, how long does it take to get a replacement title deed if it was lost?
It doesn't take long at all. So the sooner we can sign the Regulation 68.1 with a client, we sign it immediately. In fact, I've got a client now, she said she's still going to look for the title deed. She might have lost it. But when I went to sign the transfer documents with her, I signed the Regulation 68.1 with her already. So she said, I must just give it time till next week. She's still going to go scratch around, but if she doesn't find it, she will let me know. But luckily, I've got the Regulation 68.1, so we lodge it then at the deeds office. We then get a copy within a week. Then we place the advert 2 weeks, and after the 2 weeks that there's no objection, then we can lodge the transfer. So there's probably a delay in the whole transfer process of maybe 3 weeks. But while that advert is lying at the deeds office for inspection after the advert has been placed, the attorneys will continue with obtaining rates clearance certificates and transfer duty receipts and all those things. But to get a copy of the title deed from the deeds office, because you first need to get a copy and then you can place your advert. That must lie for 2 weeks. So it takes a week to get a copy thereof. You then place your ad. It then lies for 2 weeks, and then you lodge your transfer documents, and everything can be lodged at the same time. So you're probably looking 2 to 3 weeks to get everything sorted for the lost title deed. So we spoke about the bond cancellation fees that's payable that very often the sellers forget about. And what sellers also need to remember is that the bank, when their bond is cancelled, the bank can charge penalty interest, 90 days penalty interest on the bond cancellation, because when you sign a bond with Standard Bank, Absa Bank, Nedbank, FNB, any bank, there's a clause in your mortgage loan, home loan agreement with all the banks that states, if you as a mortgagor or borrower cancels your bond before the last installment is due in 20 years' time, you are entitled to do so, but you must give the bank 90 days or 3 months notice of your intention to do so. And if you don't give them notice, you'll be liable for a penalty interest of 90 days or 3 months worth of interest. So it's important for sellers, when you sign your mandate with sellers, tell them, did you give notice to your bank to cancel your bond? Just give them notice that you are selling your property so that that 90-day period can start running. so that you don't have to, as a seller, then pay the 90 or 3-month penalty interest because you are cancelling your bond early, because you are cancelling your bond before the last installment is due in 20 years' time. Because sellers very often get a fright when we get the cancellation figures from the bank and we send it to them. They then say, oh, but what is this penalty at the bottom? That is the 90-day penalty period because you are cancelling your bond before the last installment is due in 20 years' time. So the bank is entitled, in terms of the home loan agreement that you signed with them, the bank is entitled to charge you 3-month penalty interest. But that 3-month penalty interest starts to run. So even if they didn't give the notice before the time, as soon as the transferring attorneys give the bank the notice that this property has been sold, we please want a copy of the title deed, we please want the cancellation figures so that we can issue the guarantees, the penalty period will start to run. So let's say the transfer takes place in 2 months' time. Your seller will then only be liable for 1 month's penalty interest because the period runs and it gets reduced on a daily basis. But it's important to know that, the sellers don't want to still pay a month's penalty interest at the end and then request that we delay the transfer and the purchaser must consent thereto. So let them know to give notice to their bank when they decide to sell the property so that that penalty starts to run and that when the transfer takes place, there is no penalty interest anymore that is payable by the seller. With regards to consultants' fees, we don't really have that in Cape Town purely because the rates department is relatively on the ball. We don't wait too long to get rates figures from the municipality that the seller must pay in order for us to get a rates clearance certificate. They're quite on the ball. It normally takes about a week. And once we've paid them, it's another week. Then we've got the rates clearance certificate from the municipality. In some provinces, it is an issue. I know that in Gauteng, STBB in Gauteng use consultants to go and obtain the rates figures from the municipality. Physically, they go into the municipality, they go at the counter, get those figures for the attorneys, conveyancers there in Joburg. They then send those figures to the attorneys. The attorneys then pay it, and once they've paid it, the consultants go back into the municipality to go and hound the municipality to issue those certificates, the rates clearance certificates for the attorneys. So those consultants charge between 700 and 800 rand in order to attend to that, in order to speed the issuing of the rates clearance certificates by the municipalities, to speed it up. Because very often the guys in Joburg can wait a month or 2 or 3 months for those rates clearance figures and rates clearance certificates because of the delays that are there in those municipalities. And then a consultant will be appointed to go and get those certificates as quickly as possible, and 700 or 800 rand, and your seller will be liable to pay that fee in order to speed up the process for the transfer of his property. Then there's also issuing of guarantees. So let's say, for example, your seller has now purchased another property, and he is obviously going to utilize the funds from the proceeds of the sale where he is now purchasing again. Then guarantees, the attorneys attending to his transfer will have to issue guarantees for those attorneys attending to the purchase of where he's now purchasing again. And it costs money to issue those guarantees. I know normally in our retail transactions, we don't charge a fee for that. There are attorneys that do charge between 400 and 600 rand plus VAT in order to issue those guarantees for those attorneys attending to the seller's purchase of a property, because there is a hell of a lot of admin involved. Again, you write to them, you request their guarantee requirements, you bring it back to your seller. If there is no cash from the purchaser in your trust account that you can issue guarantees for, you've got to go to your purchaser and get him to sign new pay authorities where the money from his bond buying the seller's property is going straight to where the seller is purchasing again. So there's a bit of admin involved there, and there are attorney firms that charge a fee in order to issue those guarantees for where your seller is purchasing again. Rates and levy clearance figures. These figures, the municipality, when we write to them to tell them that the seller has sold a property, the municipality will come back. They will ask us for 2 months advance, together with a current account, and in fact, any amount outstanding which is owed by the seller to the municipality that's outstanding for the last 2 years will be on that figure that the municipality will give to us. Most sellers are clued up about this. They do know that they must pay 2 months in advance as well. Some don't. So it's important just to tell them, just remember, you must pay for 2 months in advance as well in order for the municipality to issue the attorneys with a rates clearance certificate. But they must just remember, those 2 months in advance is just a credit on their municipal account. It's not an amount that they throw in the ocean, that they're going to lose. Not at all. It's a credit on the municipal account, so they can know for the next 2 months at least, they don't have to pay any more rates and taxes to the municipality, because they will see that there is a credit on their municipal account. And if there's any credit on their municipal account on the day of transfer, then it will be refunded to the seller. Historical debts, which are older than 2 years, will not be on those figures that the municipality will provide to the transferring attorneys. The municipality will have to sort that out with the seller whenever they want to. But the maximum amount is for 2 years and for obviously the 2 months in advance.
Okay, Hein, there's a question from Giel from our Stellenbosch office. He says, is the rates and levies is always for the seller's account?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Giel, goeiemôre. Lekker om van jou te hoor. So Giel, yes. Whatever the outstanding amount is for the rates, and whatever the outstanding amount is due to the body corporate or homeowners association in respect of levies, is payable by the seller. The seller must settle his accounts that he's got with the municipality and with the body corporate or the homeowners association. So the seller must pay for that. But we're going to get to the fact that the purchaser is liable for the cost that the municipality charges and the body corporate charges to issue the levy clearance or the rates clearance certificate. So your seller is liable for any outstanding rates, taxes, water, electricity, levies. He must pay for that. But the purchaser is liable for the little fee that the municipality charges or the homeowners association charges to issue the certificate once the seller has paid everything already. Bridging finance, sometimes, in the conveyancing process, your seller requires... Yeah.
Giel says why? Why is the rates and levies always for the seller's account?
The rates and levies are for the seller's account because that is his account. So if my seller owns a property and I write to the municipality and I say to the municipality, my seller is selling a property, the municipality is going to say, okay, that's fantastic, but your seller, he's the owner. He still owes us 100,000 Rand for the last year. He has not paid any rates, taxes, water, electricity. So he owes us. During the time that your seller was the owner of this property, he owes us money. So we have to settle that amount that the seller owes. And the question maybe as well is, but why must the purchaser then pay for the little fee, the 400 Rand to the municipality? Once your seller has paid his 100,000 Rand outstanding debt to the municipality, the purchaser will pay the 400 Rand fee that the municipality charges to issue the rates clearance certificate then as well, because your offer to purchase and all offer to purchases or agreements with regards to sale of property says that the purchaser will pay for the cost of the transfer of the property. Your seller is liable for his debt. So whatever debt he's got with the municipality or the body corporate that he didn't pay when he was the owner, he must settle his debt. Your purchaser will get a brand new account as from date of transfer when he becomes the owner. He'll get a brand new account from the municipality starting on 0, from the municipality and from the body corporate or the homeowners association. For the purchaser will become liable on transfer. But the purchaser must still pay the fee for that levy clearance certificate, maybe 500 Rand, or rates clearance certificate, 400 Rand, because the purchaser is liable for the cost of transfer. And the issuing of those certificates is a cost of transfer, despite the fact that your seller is liable for any outstanding amounts that he owes to his service providers that he never paid. You can't give that now to the new purchaser who's now becoming the owner. He can't pay for a debt that your seller incurred with the rates department. Is that perfect, Giel? Then with regards to...
Is great. Thank you. Thanks, Han.
Then with regards to bridging finance, very often your seller will require funds. He will not have 100,000 Rand to pay to the rates department. He didn't pay for the last year. His rates and taxes, he doesn't have 100,000 Rand to pay. We then will arrange bridging finance for him. I mean, you guys know as well, if you breach your commissions, etc., we go to a bridging finance company like Rodell or Granite or whoever you choose as a bridging finance company. And the sellers must understand that there's a charge for that. No one's going to lend you money free, gratis, and for nothing. You've got to pay a fee for that. So very often the seller will have to pay the application fee of 300 or 400 Rand, and then there's obviously interest on that monies that was loaned to him until the day of registration of transfer, when his proceeds become available and when we can then pay the bridging finance companies. And as you know, I mean, the bridging finance interest is probably between 1 Rand 20 and 1 Rand 50 per 1,000 Rand per day. So, so it's not a hell of a lot of money, especially if it being bridged a small amount of money, but the sellers need to know that there's a cost involved with that. Then also with regards to, okay, yes, Giel, yeah. So I saw now, sorry, actually for the purchasers need to pay for the issuing of the certificates. The little fee that they charge, as I said, is because it forms part of the cost of the transfer. So in your offer to purchase, the purchaser must pay transfer duty or VAT. He must pay the costs of the transfer, and that is one of the costs of the transfer, is the issuing of those certificates by the municipality or the homeowners association. The cost of the compliance certificates, sellers don't always know that they need to pay for both the electric fence and the electric compliance certificate and gas certificates, and for plumbing certificates, if plumbing certificates form part of the area or the municipality where you operate. I do know that's in terms of the City of Cape Town bylaws, plumbing certificates need to be issued. And there's obviously fees for that, the inspection fees and the work that has to be done. But most sellers know about that and the fees involved. But again, those costs that's for the seller's account can be paid on transfer of the property from the proceeds of the sale. So it's not an amount that they need to pay up front. We can pay it from the proceeds. So those are the hidden costs of sellers that they don't necessarily know about. And then when I deal with sellers, the ones that they really don't know about is the fact that there's a cost for the cancellation of their mortgage bond of 4,200 Rand, for example. They really don't know about that, especially if they don't owe the bank any money. Then they are shocked to find out that there's a fee involved with the cancellation. So that's the main one. The other one that they don't know about is the penalty. They must give the bank 3 months notice if they decide to cancel their bond, because the bank will charge them 90 days penalty interest as from day of notice of the cancellation of the bond. Then with regards to the purchaser must pay bond registration costs. There's an initiation fee that is payable to the banks. So Standard Bank, ABSA, Nedbank, they all charge an initiation fee when they approve the purchaser's bond, and the purchaser's bond is registered. There's also costs for issuing of guarantees, levy clearance certificate fee, so the fee that the body corporate charges to actually issue the certificate is for the purchaser's account because it forms part of the transfer costs. Special levies, postages and petties, a full house inspection, and investment charges and the Legal Protectors Council of 5% interest that they charge, but we'll get to that. So if we have a look at the bond registration costs, very often first-time home buyers, and I had one last week, first-time home purchasers are under the impression that there are no costs involved with the bond registration. So the purchaser that I dealt with last week took out a bond. The purchase price is R1 million. The mortgage bond is for R1 million. So the bond covers the purchase price 100%. When the purchaser signed the bond documents, I then gave the purchaser the account for payment, 20,000 Rand. And the purchaser, but can't it come from the bond? He's a first-time home buyer. Surely it must come from the bond. And no, what is the purchase price? How much are you paying for this property? R1 million. Have a look here. How much is Standard Bank paying out on registration of this bond? How much are they paying out? R1 million. Well, that's for the purchase price. So there's no place on the bond to take off the 20,000 Rand because your seller is going to get 20,000 Rand less in his pocket. You can't expect your seller to pay your bond registration costs. So then it made sense to the purchaser, but he thought because he's a first-time home buyer, the cost for the bond is included. I said, well, sometimes it is, absolutely. But then you need to be clear to your mortgage originator or to your consultant at the bank and ask them to please include those costs in the bond amount. And the banks don't always do that. It's for the bank to decide. And sometimes they do have campaigns like that, but there's no guarantee that just because you're a first-time home buyer, that the costs will be included in the bond amount. So it's important for first-time home buyers for them to understand there's transfer costs and bond costs that must be paid out of their own pockets. Then there's also an initiation fee in all mortgage bonds. So whether the bond is, again, with Standard Bank or FNB or Nedbank, doesn't matter. Each and every bank charges an initiation fee. The initiation fee, I know it off by heart already, is 6,037 Rand and 50 cents because you see it on all the mortgage bond documents and we explain it to the clients when we sign the bond documents. That initiation fee is charged by the bank. It's an amount that must be paid to the bank, and 99.9% of the time, that amount, the 6,037 Rand and 50 cents, is just debited to the home loan account. So it's not an amount that the purchaser must pay out of his own pocket to his bank. It's obviously a great idea to pay for the purchaser when the bond is registered, to pay that amount of money into his bond account so that he or she doesn't pay interest on the 6,037 Rand and 50 cents as well over the loan term of 20 years. So it is good to pay it into the bond account on registration of the mortgage bond. Cost for issuing of guarantees. Again, it's the same story with the seller on the other side that was purchasing a property, where your purchaser wants to utilize his cash funds or from the sale of a property to purchase this property. The attorney attending to his sale will obviously charge a fee for issuing those guarantees. And very often, the most important one is that very often the purchaser has got some funds in his account, cash monies, and the offer to purchase, as you know, state that cash funds, he can either pay it in cash to the conveyancers, or he can go and ask his bank to issue a guarantee to the conveyancing attorneys. So very often when those purchasers come and sign the transfer documents with me, I tell them, look, you've still got a balance there. Your bond was approved, so there's still 200,000 Rand shortfall. You've got the option, do you want to pay it in cash to us, or do you want to ask your bank to issue guarantee? They normally say, oh no, they're going to go to their bank and issue a guarantee. That's absolutely fine. The only thing is that that bank is going to charge them a fee for issuing that guarantee. It's normally about 4% of the value of the guarantee, so 4% of 200,000 Rand. The other thing that they must remember is that that bank will take that 200,000 Rand out of the client's account and put it in a suspense account with the bank. Because if the bank issues a guarantee to STBB attorneys that on transfer of this property to their client, they will pay the 200,000 Rand to STBB attorneys, they cannot allow the client to have access to that 200,000 Rand because the bank has now issued a guarantee that they will pay the 200,000. So the bank takes the 200,000 Rand out of the client's check account or whatever, and they put it in a suspense account with the bank in order to pay out when the guarantee needs to pay out. Very often the banks don't give the client any interest on that 200,000 Rand while it is sitting there in the bank's suspense account. And the bank will obviously charge a fee, 4%, in order to issue that guarantee to STBB attorneys. So I always tell the clients, you know what, if I was in your shoes, I'd rather pay the 200,000 Rand into the account of STBB because at least you'll know that you earn interest on that money and you don't have to pay a fee for that because you've paid the money into our trust account. So there's no 4% payable to your bank. There's no you not earning any interest on that 200. Rather pay it into our trust account. We'll invest it, you'll earn interest, there's no cost involved to you, and the purchasers normally go for that option. I've had purchasers before that said, no, I want to issue a guarantee, and then after the guarantee was issued, they phoned to say it was a stupid idea. I didn't understand how costly and whatever it was. Despite the fact that you explained it to me, it's actually not worth it. I should have just paid the 200,000 Rand to you, and so that you can invest the money on my behalf. Then, Giel, there's also a levy clearance certificate fee. So if the body corporate or the homeowners association charges a fee to issue that certificate, or very often there's a fee charged by the homeowners association. Very often you'll see in a title deed condition, this property may not be sold, alienated or transferred without the consent of the Fernwood Homeowners Association. The transferring attorneys will then have to get a consent from that homeowners association, and they always charge a fee to issue that consent, 500 Rand, 1,000 Rand, 1,500 Rand, and your purchaser must pay for that fee for the issuing of the consent because that is a cost of transfer of the property. So the purchaser will have to pay for the managing agents or the body corporate or the homeowners association issuing that consent, or of course the levy clearance certificate, 300, 400 or 500 Rand. That is for the purchaser to pay because that's a cost of transferring the property to him. The seller is liable for all his outstanding amounts, absolutely. Your seller will pay for all outstanding levies, all outstanding rates and taxes. And once he's done that, then the body corporate or the managing agents will issue the levy clearance certificate and charge another 300 or 400 Rand for that, and your purchaser must pay for that because that's a cost of transfer. If we have a look at special levies, obviously if special levies are charged in terms of the Sectional Titles Act, whoever is the owner of the sectional title unit at the time when the body corporate decided to raise that special levy will be liable to pay that special levy. It's important to have this discussion with the sellers and the purchasers to make sure whether there are any special levies payable and who's liable for it. If it's a once-off payment that the body corporate want at the time that the levy is raised, and it's a once-off payment, your seller is liable for that, whoever is the owner at the time of the raising of that resolution or the raising of that special levy. If the special levy is payable, let's say, for example, over a monthly installment period of 12 months, your seller will be liable until transfer, purchaser will be liable from transfer onwards to carry on with that special levy, but they must be aware of it. And then, it's important that your seller advise you whether there is a special levy raised or not. The transferring attorneys will also become aware of it. Obviously, when we write to the body corporate for the levy clearance certificate, they will tell us, oh, but there's a special levy that's payable as well. And we will then advise the purchaser that there's a special levy that is to be raised against him for the next 6 months or 3 months or whatever. In terms of postages and petties, that's a fee that all attorneys charge. It's normally around about 900 Rand or 950 Rand. So the conveyancing fee that they will see on their statement of account, that covers only the conveyancer's professional fee. So it's only the professional fee. It does not relate to any other charges in order, for example, electricity, computers, paper, ink, telephone calls, all those things. So that is why there are postages and petties in the statement of account, normally about 900, 950 Rand. I know that there are attorney firms that charge more than 1,000 Rand, but it's round about, let's call it 1,000 Rand. And that is for the recovery of expenses or for actual cost of attending to, of producing the requirement work, the required documents, etc. Office rental, office computers, office telephones, paper, ink, pens, whatever we use to actually produce the work. Then a full house inspection report. You as the agent, we as the conveyancers, we act as appointed by the seller. So the seller is our client. We look after the seller, we look after his interest. The buyer carries the onus to do a proper inspection of the property. Buyer beware. Go and inspect the property. Make sure that you know the difference, Mr. Purchaser, between latent and patent defects. Make sure that you know what the seller would be liable for and what you are liable to fix once you purchase the property and the property is in your name. When does the footstoots clause protect the seller? And when will the buyer have a valid claim against the seller? Well, the footstoots clause states that the seller will not be liable for any latent or patent defects. Patent defects are defects that you can see. So if you walk through the house as a purchaser and you see, oh, but there's a crack in that wall, that tile is chipped, this door doesn't close properly, those are patent defects that you can see. Latent defects are defects that you cannot see by just walking through the property. You will not know that there is a leak in the pool if you as a purchaser just quickly walk through the property. You will only become aware of that once you maybe stay in the property for a month or two and you see your water level drop drastically very quickly, then you'll become aware. So those are latent defects, defects that you cannot see when you walk through a property. So the footstoots clause protects the seller from latent and patent defects if the seller had no knowledge of those defects. So the seller must show that he had no knowledge of those latent defects, because if he had knowledge thereof, then he had to disclose it to the purchaser. Because if he had knowledge and he didn't disclose it to the purchaser, then he is not protected by the footstoots clause. Then the buyer will have a claim against him. So when does this occur? This occurs when the seller, for example, never occupied or resided in the property, or he did, but many, many moons ago. He put tenants into his property, and if there's a little leak in the wall, or the tenants never told him about this, he as the seller really and truly had no knowledge of that defect in his property. In that scenario, he will be protected from that latent defect in terms of the footstoots clause, because he really had no knowledge of that defect. It's only if he had knowledge of the defect, of that latent defect, and he didn't disclose it, then he will be liable to the purchaser to fix that defect in the property. So it is a good idea, obviously, for a purchaser, if he's concerned about defects in the property, to employ an inspection company to go and inspect the property, to go and have a look at the foundation, have a look at the roof trusses in the roof, have a look at the roof tiles, whether there are any cracks, whether there are any problems with the trusses in the ceiling, whether there are any leaks in the pool, etc., 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 especially if the seller isn't residing in the property and it's very easy for the seller to say I had no knowledge. So then obviously the buyer can appoint an inspection company to go and inspect the property and to provide a report as to the condition of the property. And again, it will then be for the purchaser's account to pay for that report from such inspection company. Investment charges, it's not a hell of a lot in terms of legal practice counsel. 5% on interest earned on the attorney's trust account must be paid over to that legal practitioner's fidelity fund. It's not a lot of money. So, for example, if we invest money on behalf of the purchaser, the purchase price or the deposit or whatever interest he earns, let's say, for example, he earns 100 Rand interest in our trust account for the couple of days it was with us. If he earns 100 Rand, we have to pay 5% of that. So 5 Rand must then go to the legal practitioner's fidelity fund. So it is not a lot of money. It's only 5% of the actual interest that the attorney earned. A lot of people said, oh, 5%, but we are only earning 6% with you. Now you're taking 5%. No, it's 5% of the 6% that must be paid over to the legal practitioner's fidelity fund. So it's not a lot of money. Once we explain it like that to the purchasers, they are absolutely happy because it's not a big amount of money. And Michelle, it is 16 minutes past 10. I think I finished on time for a change.
You did, and thank you. Great. Thank you so much for that very informative presentation. I think it's very important that agents understand exactly what costs are involved and discuss it with their clients so that there's no hidden surprises, in going forward.
Spot on. Absolutely, Michelle.
Great. Thank you, Hein. Much appreciated. Michelle, you have a great day further.
It's a pleasure. Thank you everyone for joining us and good luck with the rest of your meeting and keep well. See you next time. Thanks a lot, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, Han. Have a good month.
Thanks. You too. Bye. Bye.